Since this is a statistics class, we should start off with the definition of statistics. Statistics is the science of collecting, describing, and interpreting data. Before we talk about this definition anymore, we have to talk about what the word data means. So data is just a collection of information. That's a simple definition we can start with. We can say a collection of recorded information. Now what type of information do we care about in statistics? We don't actually care about information such as pages of information or paragraphs of information. What we actually care about are little pieces of information that people record. And the word data is actually plural. The singular version is data value, which is a piece of information that describes something about a person, animal, thing, or place. Let's give some examples of data values. Let's say I ask a person, how tall are you? And the person says, I'm 55 inches tall. That's the person's answer. So in this case, 55 inches is the data value. It's a piece of information that describes something about a person, animal, thing, or place. In this case, it's a piece of information that describes this person right here. So after we recorded this piece of information right here, we would say that this is a data value that we have recorded. What if we asked, well, we could do an example that doesn't have to do with people. Or maybe we'll do one more example with people. I say, what is your major? Maybe I'm talking to a college student. And the person says, I'm a psychology major. Now the word psychology, or, well, if the person just says psychology, then we could say that psychology is a data value. This is a piece of information that describes something about this person. In this case, it describes the person's major. And if we were entering, let's say we asked 10 people, what's your major? And we entered them into a spreadsheet like Excel, which I'll show you how to do later. What we would have is a column of people's answers, and it would look something like maybe psychology, business, engineering, and it would just show the major of all 10 people all the way down. Each of those words would be a data value describing one person. What if we recorded the height of a tree? So I'll try to draw a tree. And we find out that the tree is, I'm not sure what the height would be. Let's say it's 98 inches tall. Now 98 inches is the data value that describes this tree. It describes the height of this tree. So in this case, 98 inches would be a data value. So we have three data values that we've looked at so far: 55 inches, psychology, and 98 inches. And sometimes people will ask me, what if we just wrote down 98 and didn't write down inches? Would 98 by itself be a data value? And it actually would be. You could say that 98 is the data value, and that, or you could say that 98 inches is the data value. It might just depend on how specific you want to be about the data value. So we talked about the meaning of a data value, and I said that data is plural for data value. So, and data value is singular and data is plural. So when we talk about data in this class, we're just talking about a collection of data values. More specifically, we're talking about a collection of recorded data values, such as a list of data values or a set of data values that have been recorded on a piece of paper or entered into a computer. Now that we know what data means, it's just a collection of data values, we can talk about what it means to collect, describe, and interpret data. Collecting data just means to seek out and record data. And the way you do that depends on the situation. If I want to know how tall a person is, I could ask the person, I could have the person fill out a survey, or I could just measure the person with a ruler. If I wanted to know a person's major in college, I could give them a survey, or I could ask them. But if I wanted to know the height of a tree, I obviously can't ask the tree. I would just have to measure the tree. So the way you collect data depends on the type of data you want to record. Describing data. Describing data just means, well, at least in this class, it means to summarize or condense data into a way that's easier to understand. So if well, two main ways of describing data that we'll talk about are calculating values that summarize a set of data and creating charts and graphs. So if I recorded the heights of 10 people and I calculated the average, meaning I added up the 10 heights and divided the total by 10, that would be, well, that average would summarize the entire data set of those 10 heights, and that would be an example of describing data, because I'm summarizing the data set. If I asked 10 people, what's your major, and I calculated the percentage of people who told me that they're a psychology major, then that would be an example of describing data, because I'm summarizing my data set. If I calculate percentages and I find out that out of the people that I surveyed, 30% were psychology majors, 50% were business majors, and maybe 20% were English majors, those percentages would summarize my data set. And you could say that the process of calculating those averages or those percentages would be an example of describing data. If you create bar charts or line charts, that's also describing data, because you're summarizing the data set in a way that makes it easier for other people to understand. So interpreting data. Interpreting data means to just make sense out of the data and to find out what the data is actually telling you. When a person collects a data set, a person is trying to answer some type of question. A person is trying to learn something about the world that we live in. And when the person goes through the process of reaching a conclusion and actually deciding what the data set is telling the person, then that's interpreting data. For example, if I wanted to know if, let's say I wanted to know if people who spend more years in college actually end up making more money after they graduate, I could do a survey on that, and then I could ask a group of people, how many years did you spend in college, and how much money are you now making? And once I'm at the point where I actually reach my conclusion about whether it appears that going to college longer will help you make more money, I'm interpreting my data set because I'm reaching a conclusion. I'm actually trying to decide what the answer to my question is. So that's interpreting data. Another example could be, let's say I'm trying to figure out if people who, let's say I'm trying to figure out if students who are working are getting less, college students who are working are getting less sleep than college students who aren't working. So I want to find out if college students who are working are sleep deprived. So in that case, I would survey a group of a certain number of working students, and I would survey a certain number of non-working students, and I would ask each person, how much sleep do you usually get per night? And once I've recorded my data, I'll reach one of three conclusions. I'll either conclude that it appears that working students are getting less sleep than non-working students. I'll conclude that I might conclude that working students are getting maybe more sleep than non-working students, or maybe I'll conclude that there appears to be no difference in sleep between working and non-working students. I might conclude that I found no evidence for a difference in the amount of time or in the amount of sleep those two groups of people are getting. And any of those three conclusions might be possible. It's just the data that I collect will lead me to one of those three conclusions. So the conclusion that I make depends on what my data tells me. And that's interpreting data, reaching your your conclusion. So we've talked about the meaning of a data value. We talked about the definition of statistics. Let's see what time we're at right now. Sorry about that. So let's talk about why a person would want to record data. We talked about that people want to learn about the world, but, well, people want to learn about the world and they want to be able to make decisions. And for example, a person might want to, well, I'll restart this video in a second.